many people have had negative experiences with churches, with God in general, and therefore it is no wonder in 12-step groups that people are often turned off to this idea. I get it. And, I've had my own baggage with God, and I get it. And I'm not even at the stage where I'm like pissed off at God anymore, but a lot of people are, or just pissed off at the people who tried to get them to believe in God, or who played God and represented God. And I get that. So my thought on this is, what if we reframe the very notion of God?
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Well, greetings, compadres. Guess what? It is now March, and this is another episode, 12 Steps for Anyone Who Wants Them. So now, being that there are 12 months in a year, there's a step for every month. So if you are a 12-stepper, you know that. And so January being the first month, we talked about powerlessness, and we talked about the paradox of powerlessness. So what we did was we talked about how we're powerless over our struggles, but if we reframe powerlessness and we look at it as empowerment, we can get this whole new viewpoint. So then in February, the second month of the year, spoiler alert, we talked about step 2, and we talked about how we came to believe that there is a power greater than ourselves. So we talked about coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And really what we did was, talked a lot about emotions, and we talked about how those affect us and how to deal with them, and that by pushing them away, it's not actually helping us. So we just I took a little side bar on that as well. And now this month of March, we will be talking about step 3. Okay. So before I launch into it, I just want to say, as an aside, as a reminder, as we go through this series that I'll do once a month this year, to please remember to just keep in mind that I endorse 12-step programs. They do not endorse me. So I'm not any kind of an expert or an official. In no way do I represent Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, none of those, or any other 12-step program, Celebrate Recovery, any of them. Basically, what I do is take what I've learned through the 12-step program that I'm a member of, and then I talk about my experiences within that 12-step program, and really what I've learned kind of up until this point, peppered in with, because it's not like, this isn't like a step study, so it's not a complete set of step work that you can just be done listening and just go, hey, I've been sponsored, I've done the 12 steps. But it's to give you an idea of what 12-step programs are like. And maybe you'd want to do it for yourself, and maybe you wouldn't. And that's completely fine. And one more thing I should mention is I keep the readings intact. So for me, I've read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12. And those are the books that I usually do a reading from, if I do one at all. And so those I keep intact. And that is one thing that the General Service Office has asked, is that those readings be kept intact, and, they're not some kind of like oh, let me make up my own thing and then say that it's, AA or NA or, no. Okay. So I'm going to touch on, let's see, I'm going to touch on 3 main points today as I talk about step 3, which is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Okay, so we just got finished talking about in step 2, or at least addressing, coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves. Because when we have struggles, addictions, anything that really holds us captive, and we really get to the end of our rope and we realize that self-reliance has failed us, we find that we're in a position of needing something or someone to help us, right? When we realize that our own strength has led us to this place of complete destitute and devastation, we need an exterior force to help us, okay? And so I'm going to talk about the easy button first, okay? I'm going to talk about the easy button. I'm going to talk about the God problem. And then the one that I was toying with, should I put it in or not, but I'm going to, is electricity. And this will make sense later. But just in case you're a process person and you kind of need to know where we're going, I penciled that in as well, and that's my plan. All right. So I'm going to do a little reading from the 12 and 12. And this is from step 3, shockingly, from the 12 and 12. And it says this: practicing step 3 is like the opening of a door, which to all appearances is still closed and locked. All we need is a key and the decision to swing the door open. There's only one key, and it is called willingness. Once unlocked by willingness, the door opens almost of itself. And looking through it, we shall see a pathway beside which it has an inscription. It reads, "This is a way to a faith that works." In the first 2 steps, we were engaged in reflection. We saw that we were powerless over alcohol or whatever else you're struggling with. But we also perceive that faith of some kind, if only AA in and of itself, is possible to anyone. These conclusions did not require action. They only require acceptance. And that's the end of the reading. So basically what it's talking about is, here's the key that's going to unlock the rest of this whole jam for you, right? And the key is willingness. And when you turn it, the door kind of just opens by itself. And I know you've probably used a door like this in your past. I have, where the second I stick the key in and I turn it, boom, it's like spring loaded or something. I don't even know. So don't make a comment. I apologize if I said the wrong thing, but it basically opens by itself. And, hey, anything that doesn't require a lot of action, I'm in. So the first section here being the easy button, that commercial, I think it's for Staples. I'm not endorsed by Staples. Okay, I'm not paid for that, not sponsored, but they used to have this commercial back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean like a couple of 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. I don't know, somewhere in there. And it was something that could sit on your desk, and it said easy on it. And it was this red circular button, and you could just press it. And it was kind of a funny thing. I don't know. I think it was supposed to be funny. So, but here's the deal. I like things that are easy, and I like things that are efficient. And I like to work smarter, not harder. That's something I talk about a lot. And so, if anybody on TikTok ever has a life hack, I'm sure that it's my jam. Whatever it is, it's my jam. I just got finished making way too many batches of Christmas crack over the holidays where, it was this super easy microwavable way. And yeah, I ate way too much of it, but it was easy, right? So unfortunately, I kind of became my own victim of self-sabotage. Okay. So the same thing is true here, is if I'm given a key of willingness that, hey, this door is going to just basically unlock by itself, I'm down and I'll take about 17 of those keys, please. And I've learned, no, pause. What I'm going to do actually is to give you an example first. I'm going to tell you about, a lot of you have heard about my unfortunate relationship with the TSA. And by that, I mean, it's 100% my fault. It is on my side of the street and not theirs. So having said that, I'll tell you about it. I've learned as basically a super frequent traveler over the years. An example is when I have water bottles within my possession. And, there came a time in 2000 and something where I want to say it was 2000, maybe, maybe it wasn't 9/11. Maybe it was the underwear bomber, the shoe bomber. It was one of those guys, but you could no longer take water through the TSA. So inevitably, because I have a huge family, right? Somebody is carrying a water bottle in their possession when we go through the TSA to get onto the plane. So imagine this, here we are, we're going through, at least one bag gets pulled aside, and I am tempted to, and I have past tense done this multiple times, which is very embarrassing, but I'm here to admit it, launched into a big lecture, a kind lecture, but a lecture nonetheless, to the TSA agent, basically telling them how, on the way back from Maui, our 4-ounce coconut syrup was confiscated, but yet there was this massive pair of IKEA scissors that were pretty much garden shears that they didn't find. And here's the thing. We all have stories like that. This TSA agent doesn't need that. It wasn't him. He had nothing to do with it. And imagine how many other people during the day he has to hear the stories of when he pulls their bags aside, right? He doesn't need it. It is of zero value to him. And he wasn't involved in the situation of which I speak. Okay. And so basically, what I have now learned to do is to not say anything. It's kind of my challenge. Don't say anything, Amy. Just let the bag get pulled aside. Let him go through it. Let them take the water bottle out and then thank them. Have a nice day and walk away. Just walk away. Or sometimes my husband, Andrew, will take the bag aside and take responsibility for it, which I so appreciate because this is kind of new for him in the past 10 years, realizing that if it's one of our family members, it's automatically his problem, the way that moms, we're automatically in charge of all the problems, right? He has taken one for the team now and really matured and realized, oh, no, these are my kids too. This is my luggage too. We're both shared responsibility. He's come a far way. Okay. So another example of easy things. I love crock pots because they bring me a sense of accomplishment, right? That I can throw meat in the morning into a crock pot and a bunch of herbs. And by the end of the day, I have a full meal ready to serve for dinner. So no matter what the day brings, I know that dinner's already done, check the box on that. And so any stress that is dinner related has been alleviated from my plate that day. And I'm so down for that. And so if I'm in and out of the house, I can smell the crock pot cooking. And it just gives me this sense of accomplishment. Hey, I did something today. I matter. That's off the plate. Everybody's going to get to sit down together and eat dinner, which is I get fired up. I love that. I love making it a priority to sit down together even for like 15 minutes every day and have dinner, minus the weekends. All right. We're talking weekdays. All right. So that is the easy button. I like things that are efficient. So if you're going to give me a key of willingness and then you put it in the door and it basically unlocks for me, I'm in. Sign me up. So I can't say if I come to believe in a power greater than myself, then I'm not willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. Yeah, I am. I really am. You know why? Because I'd rather have someone else have the headache, to be totally honest with you. I would love to have somebody else worry about whatever it is. And I am like a master delegator these days. I love delegating. I do not have to be a control freak anymore. So I'm in. Okay. But it did take me a while to get there. I'm not going to lie. So this is why it works for me, though, is that, you know what? Hey, if I can have God worry about this, I'm down. Do I do a perfect job at it? No. Do I still want to take control back and, insert my will? Totally. 1,000%. So I need to remind myself how much better things go when I actually get out of my own way and just let God handle it. And then I remember pretty quickly now, like, oh yeah, okay, let me just let him handle it. In most circumstances, okay? Not everything, obviously. All right, number two. Number two is the God problem. Okay, so many people have had negative experiences with churches, with God in general, and therefore it is no wonder in 12-step groups that people are often turned off to this idea. I get it. And, I've had my own baggage with God and I get it. And I'm not even at the stage where I'm like pissed off at God anymore, but a lot of people are, or just pissed off at the people who tried to get them to believe in God or who played God and represented God. And I get that. So my thought on this is, what if we reframe the very notion of God? And this comes from after I read The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr, who I love. Anything by Richard Rohr, I highly recommend. But what if the word and the name Christ is just another name for everything that symbolizes death and resurrection? So what if it's not like Jesus Christ as a person? What if we just took the word Christ and we used it a bit more fluidly, like we use the word God? So maybe it's not just death and resurrection. Maybe the word Christ also could symbol divinity. Maybe it could symbol unity. I mean, symbols that are basically more than the person of Jesus Christ that we are taught about in church walls, who was born a baby in a manger, lived, until his 30s, and then was crucified on the cross, risen again, once buried, on the third day. He rolled away the stone and came out and then ascended into heaven. What if it was more? What if the word Christ was more than that? And I just invite you to let it marinate, right? Let it sit with you and see what happens when you start thinking about that a little bit. Just a little tiny bit of open-mindedness and willingness. Because if we put the key of willingness in the lock, who knows? It almost opens by itself once we turn it. Another thing I thought of is, what if Christ represents humanity? Just the full experience of everything human. It's been said that the Trinity, of course, Christ is one of those members, Jesus Christ is, and he's supposed to represent the human side of God. And so if that is the way you want to look at it, maybe the word Christ could also represent the wisdom of the entire body of religious believers. So not just Christians, which to me, that word means a huge spectrum of different things today. What I mean by the word Christian can be totally something different than what somebody else means, right? And so as I tie up this point, I'm just kind of thinking of things that bind and connect us, okay? Things that transform us, transcend us, things that are collaborative, cooperative. And, you know, I read in Everything is Spiritual by Rob Bell, another great author and wonderful book, that religio, the word religio, means to reconnect or realign. And so I'm just trying to think about, as I wrap it up, like the whole human piece of this whole thing, as I wrap up this point, like maybe if the word Christ does represent a human, then maybe it's all of those aspects of humanity needing each other. During the pandemic, we experienced this a lot. A lot of people got, pandemic dogs because they needed a connection with somebody else, a tangible connection. I think assurance, so knowing the answers to all the questions, which is what I was taught growing up. This was my perception of what I was taught growing up. Assurance, that's just more of a desire for order. It's to feel safe. It's about ego and control. And I can say this because it's my experience, because I believed in assurance. I was going to have the answer to all things about God. That's how I wanted to present myself to the world and to other people. And so stripping that away and being able to sit in the questions, that's really where the rubber meets the road on this step. So if you picture like a piece of string cheese, no, it's not string cheese, it's Swiss cheese with the holes. That's what I'm talking about. It's not a firm foundation. It's not a big old Parmesan wedge. We're talking about, this is wholly, pun intended, and a little bit flimsy feeling, and that's okay. Learning to be okay in that space is what we're talking about, right? In step 3, that's what we're talking about, is learning to trust in a God of your own understanding, that you can turn your will and your life over to, and not have all the answers and be okay with that. And that's a big challenge for a lot of people. But if all you need is a key of willingness, then it makes sense that maybe there's a little bit of magic to it. Maybe there's a little bit of a mystical sense, and maybe that's okay. That the cosmos and the universe is for us and not working against us. That maybe if we just free fall into the mystery of life, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's going to turn out. Maybe we don't need to know what's around the corner. Maybe we need to just be able to fall. And I've mentioned this before, but it always reminds me of that scene in Indiana Jones where he reaches out to, walk on that bridge, that very, very cavernous area that he's in. And it's not even coming to me right now, but he reaches out to step onto that bridge, but it's invisible. And the bridge only appears once he takes that step, right? All right. So the number 3, the third and final point that I'd like to make here is electricity. So I don't want to give you guys too much. I just want to give you enough to kind of create a little space to think a little bit. This is from the chapter in the big book called We Agnostics. I've mentioned before, I never thought I was an agnostic. I thought I could just skip through this chapter until someone suggested to me that perhaps an agnostic meant a doubter, somebody who doubts. And I was definitely in that space when I read it. So I read it and have since read it, hundreds of times and have continued to learn from the chapter. It's incredible in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. So this is from page 48. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. So, if we unpack that, what it's talking about is if I walk into a dark room and I flip the switch, I expect that the lights will come on, right? It is true that that will be the result 9 times out of 10. Also true is that if I go into my pantry and I find a box of spilled cereal, I cannot vacuum it up without plugging that vacuum in. So I need a source of power. Now, if I plug that vacuum cleaner in and I turn it on, I am going to achieve what I could not have achieved without turning it on. I would simply be running the vacuum cleaner over cereal to no avail, and in fact, creating a worse mess. And many of us in our addictive behaviors, we're just creating worse messes when we got here. And what I'd like to say is, I don't need to know how electricity works in order to use it, in order to enjoy it, in order to be grateful for it, right? I just need to know that it works. The other thing I like to think about on this step is the whole metaphor of the elephant. And I talk about this quite a bit too, so I'm sorry, but I just love it. So if you and I and your car mechanic are all placing a hand on an elephant, right? And one of us is touching the tusk, that's maybe me. You're touching maybe the ear, and your car mechanic or whoever else is touching the tail. We are all going to be feeling different parts of the same elephant. Now, where many of us get hung up is, oh, but wait a minute, but the tusk, that feels totally different from the tail. And so, I just don't understand. I need to know how this whole thing works. How does this work? How does it work that it's all an elephant? And it's like, you don't need to know. You don't need to know. All you need to do is your part, right? So embrace the tusk, the ear, the tail. Describe how it feels. Let others describe how it feels to them because they have a different experience, because they're experiencing a different part of the elephant. But the elephant is still there, and we all are grasping a part of it. That's how I like to think of step 3, is that it does not matter. We need to have, as it says in the reading, a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Now, in the religion that I was brought up in, evangelical Christianity, the assumption was your part of the elephant is correct and everybody else's is incorrect. And it is now your job to show those other people why your part of the elephant is correct. And it is a useless argument most of the time. And it's unfortunate because what it does is you sort of miss the forest for the trees. Instead of working on your own cultivation of a relationship with God, you end up going, okay, wait, how many people did I invite to Bible study this week? Okay. How many people, where am I at on the salvation timeline with, preaching the word to this person, sharing a testimony with that person, whatever, right? So maybe let's release ourselves from some of those, details and minutia. And that's a whole separate topic, but maybe what it is that we have to have a reasonable assumption that if we just back the whole train up, and this is what I had to do when I got sober, I just had to go, you know what? I think there's a God. I think he loves me. And I think he has my best interest at heart. And do I know that he's a he? No. I just have kind of held on to that because from childhood, that's how I referred to God. But it doesn't, it's not any kind of a hill to die on for me. It's just not. And so once I took the parameters down about all of that, about all of the little things that I had been collecting, if you will, since I was a child, and I just dumped them out. And I just said, you know what? I just know that God loves me. That's what I know. Okay. I don't have to know anything else because I just believe that he's there. And how do I believe that? Well, I don't actually have visual proof, but I'm going to choose to believe it. And you know why? Because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and die, what's the worst that could happen? I spent my life believing in a God that doesn't exist. Like once I get to heaven and find out that there's no God there, at least I will have lived my life believing that it was a possibility. And I think that is where in the past I've gotten hung up on a lot of stuff is that, but the Bible says, but the Bible says, but the Bible says. And once I stopped taking the Bible literally, my whole world opened up and I suddenly could see with a new pair of glasses that maybe, just maybe, it's not what it seems. And I need to be willing to set it aside. I need to just be willing to set all of that collection aside of the things that I collected over the years. And so back to electricity, I don't need to maybe know how it works, right? I just need to know that it works. Let's just get to the brass tacks, right? What kind of a God, I wrapped the entire podcast episode up with this. What kind of a God do you think you could believe in? Does it even need to be defined? Because at some point, we just have to take that leap of faith. We have to step out onto that bridge and watch it appear. So whether it's, quantum physics, whatever it is, the reality is, there's no such real thing, generally speaking, as universal law anymore. It is completely plausible to choose your own conception of God, whether or not it's a doorbell, whether or not it's Buddha, whatever it is. A lot of people believe in nature. A lot of people make the group their higher power if they're in a 12-step group. It's just enough to say that we know that there is an underlying rhythm. There is an underlying heartbeat to the universe, and that maybe seemingly unconnected events or people or circumstances are connected. There are tons of things. I'm not going to say everything happens for a reason. I'm not going to say God is in all things. Just look at the Holocaust. I mean, I'm just saying, for me, I believe in an underlying rhythm and cadence of the universe, who I choose to call God. And because I have seen with my eyes many miracles just in my own life, things that I never could do on my own strength, getting sober being one of them. Because I have seen that, I choose to believe that this God of my understanding is for me and not against me. And funny enough, that is found in the book of Romans in the Bible. Bringing it back around to my early childhood days. So, something to marinate on. What is a God, or who is a God that you could imagine turning your life over? And two, and do you have to know everything about who that God is? Do you need proof of his existence? So next time you walk into a room today, flip on the light switch and think about it for just a half of a second, right? How does that electricity get in there? I don't know. I don't have time to care. I just need to rely on the fact that it's going to be there when I need it, and that there's a current flowing so that when I walk in and I turn it on, it's there. And you know what it does? It creates a spirit of gratitude. Makes me really thankful for electricity. All right. So for your bailout bag, just invite you to give it a little bit of thought. If the key is willingness and you're going to stick it in the doorknob and turn it, and it's going to open automatically, almost automatically, then maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth picking up that key of willingness, putting it in the doorknob and turning it. Well, guys, be kind, rewind, and thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.